I've retaken your classes enough times.
So how is everybody on APIs? Starting to understand APIs, know how to pull data from APIs?
Yeah, actually, there was one that I was looking at that I've got for another class.
Okay.
That is, it's weather.gov's
All right, so it's weather.gov. I know exactly what you're talking about because this guy showed up in my office wondering why it's so broken.
Because I was looking at it and I couldn't.
It's whack.
Is it? 'Cause like,
It's horrible.
it's free, and then you click on here's the API, and it just
It's a horrible documentation. Yes.
Imagine thinking the government's gonna dump money in anything that's useful.
So this API is here. And it can do requests and such. So you would go out to the specs, and then from specs, you can pull these parts out, right? So you can generate all the stuff you need from the weather API. What there is if you go out and do a Python search for just Python weather API, you're going to find a whole separate one that's like open something.
Yeah, after we found that one, I couldn't find it again.
Okay.
I got lost.
So let's
that's when I
do
moved to
Python
Dad
weather API. All right. So one of the common ones was, I think this was the one that was an asynchronous wrapper around it. Get weather. No, that's something else. There it is. Open weather map is an API that allows you to grab the keys specifically for open weather, and then you could go in and figure out what that was. So if you go out here and open weather in a new tab, maybe it works. Maybe it doesn't. Okay, so like this one needs a key, and then you got to go create a key, blah, blah, blah. This one's called Open Weather Map API.
Okay.
And that was another one that was specifically written for Python, or being able to pull it in with Python and clean that up. It sounded like a lot of people did not like weather.govs.
Gotcha. Well, because I was looking for one that was free and didn't limit me to like 100 requests. So
Yeah, you only get like 100 requests, and if it's not, it's just not very clean in how you do it. What's nice is you can come out here and test a few things. So like here, it's filter by station ID, right? And then you got to add an ID. Well, how do I get the ID, right? Well, then you got to go back over here and go find out the station ID. It's not that great. Yeah, just not great. So if I do this and then execute, let's see if it actually returns.
Oh, there was a rapid.
Yeah, so like here, right, you're going to get back your results, and then the IDs, you're specifically looking for an ID, so that's the response body. That's not what I want. Yeah, it didn't have great documentation is what it boiled down to. So, which means, like Josh said, you got into it, started moving with it, and then realized it's horrible and moved on to a different API. That's a good idea.
Okay.
Open dad jokes API. There's only 2 things in there.
All right. So again, with API, what you guys are trying to figure out is that some are good, some are bad. Some have good documentation, some are horrible. So when you guys pick your projects, pick mindfully, right? When we dealt with the Steam one, there was great documentation, great examples of how to use it, etc. They spent a lot of time on that API. The idea for this week was that we would cover some more API if somebody's got something else they want to cover. Otherwise, we'll jump in early to next week's material so that you essentially had 2 weeks of that. How are we doing on APIs? We want to keep going, not going?
It's just a smidge more.
Let's see. So let's grab yet another rapid one.
What do you find interesting?
Not yet. Let me get signed in here.
We're working with NumPy next, right?
Yeah. All right. Oh, let's see. Popular ones. Let's find something here.
Like an NFL one.
An NFL one.
Yeah, like odds or something like that.
There's a couple out there.
I guess I don't know how that would work because the season hasn't started yet.
Yeah, it's probably not gonna pull anything. Live sports odds was one of the old ones that came up there. So let's look at this one. We can do 500. Okay. So again, most of these APIs are all going to be REST APIs. They're not really written in Python, right? If you guys go look and search for Python APIs for sports betting, like you just look, Python sports betting API. What they did, for example, odds API, this is just a wrapper for the other APIs that you're finding on Rapid API, right? Meaning they wrote a bunch of classes and functions to interact with that information in a Pythonic way so that you're not having to write everything yourself. So if we just go back here and look and see what's here, let's show you an example of how to write this kind of stuff, right? So here in this one, let's see if we had anything all. And let's see, when excluded, only recently updated in-season sports appear, include this parameter if you want to see all. Okay, so what we want to do is say false, meaning that we just want to get the current ones out of what's going in there. Right? When we test this just to see if we get any input, we get American NFL, CFL, tennis. Okay. So let's go back to code snippets, Python request. Let's copy this out. Give me a new project here just so I can start from scratch. Let's call this our odds project. All right, this window. And again, this will be good practice for setting up a brand new project, right? So we created one in here. If we go through a new project, it's actually going to create a Python environment specifically for this project. From there, we can either use the odds API or we are going to use, in this case, the Rapid API stuff, right? So be a good mark to go ahead and just throw this Rapid API link in here so that we know what we're talking about. And then let's copy this code out so we can get something to start with. All right. We need to install the request module, right click. Notice how this is red, says it's not installed. You can just go to install packages, or you can go down to pip install that package, or you can go to Python packages and search for it there. So any of those ways are acceptable. Okay. So we have that. Let's get our API there. Boom, API. Remember on this API key, your best bet is to go in here, create a new Python file called config, right? And in config, we're going to take that key that you had in main. You could actually just store this like this. Here, config, store something like this, there. And then you have a key. This needs to be an equals, something like that, so that you're storing your key in a config file. And over in your main file, you'll say from config import, say star, and that just brings everything over, which means we can take this key and post that in this spot so that we're not actually committing our key out to everybody. You would want to make sure that this config.py does not get added to your GitHub when you guys are actually doing GitHub. All right, so we got a query string of all to false. What this is doing is playing with this optional parameter. So when excluded, only recently updated in-season sports will appear, right? So if we say don't include, then it will not actually put it in our header, which is basically saying don't give us this. So for now, we're just going to exclude that out. All right. Remember, when this comes back, it's going to give us some JSON content as response. And then we got that data that's going to print that out in JSON format. All right. So if we execute this code,
Can't use hyphens. Can you?
no, this is a different issue. Oh, yes, underscore. Query string, fine. So we, no matter what, we need a name string, but we don't necessarily need anything in it. It can be an empty query string, but we need something. Okay, there we go. So we got this list back of everything that's inside of there, right? So if you remember, instead of having to store that multiple times, we can copy that, go out to our config, and we can even call this data, right? And then we can store this so that we can see it, something like that. Might be nice to actually see what this is. So if we have this first key, group, title, description, active, it has rights, and then here, all right? And then we can actually see how this is broke out, just so you guys can see what's going in. I'm just going to do a couple of them here so that we can at least see what's in there. And we got all of them, right? Unfortunately, I think there was a very long list of all the ones that were in here. So let's just try to break this out a little bit. Instead of doing that, let's go back here. You guys remember you can use pretty print, so PP print. And let's pretty print that out here. There we go. That gave us a much easier one. So let's take that. Take this, put that in our data. And we can see everything that's all the way down there. All right. Obviously it didn't align and all that. You guys can work on alignment. I'm not going to get too carried away here. Okay. So in each one of these, this is a list, right? So it's a list of dictionaries, and that dictionary comes back. They all have the same format, and we can go grab the one. So you mentioned NFL, right? So we would look for this key here called American Football _NFL. We would use this key in order to pull things back for that specific one. So if we go back here and we look at the odds requires that we pass the sport in this string, right? So instead of upcoming here, we would pass in that key that we found, which was American NFL. We want the region that's going to come back. This would be US. We could also post anything else. US is what we're looking for. In the odds format, these are all optional parameters that we could set if we want to make sure we had it. So odds is going to be decimal, or we could do American. Let's just keep it decimal. Actually, let's convert that to American. Markets, you have H2H and spreads. So if you guys have ever done sports betting, you have head-to-head stuff, and then you have the money line. That's H2H. You also have the spreads between everything. You can adjust as you see fit. Those are comma separated, and ISO. So if this works, we can test this to make sure it works out here in the nice little API. Looks like we got all the odds for the different teams as we go through. So code snippet, notice this is our query string. We just need to take that back to our main. And then that would be our new query string here, right? And if we look at where we're going, our URL changes, right? These headers are going to be the same. So what would be nice now is to create some functions to go get specific information. So def get sports. All right. And in get sports, we're going to set our URL and all of this stuff. Let's do this. So the idea here is that we are going to use our URL. We got our header, our query string, we get a response, and then we could do something with this response. So this would be something like return response.json. And that function would work in order to go get that information. Then we could store that down here. So it'd be something like data equals response.json. Or in this case, it'd just be get sports. Everybody see how you write this? So here we're using this. We created our own function called get sports, and that get sports will return this information back. All right. This X rapid key, in order for that to be passed through, we would have to pass it into our function. So we would say API key. And then from here, you would just call this API key. And here you would say API key equals, and then it's whatever came in from the other side, which was this file name at the very top. Something like that. All right. The other way to do that is to use global. You guys remember globalscape? So we could use global and then pass that key in so we don't have to pass it in, right? That works between all functions. All right, if we wanted to get the odds for American football, like we said, so we would say NFL equals get odds, right? And we need to create a function called get odds. So let's do that.
So Jason, how come if you're just doing a function to get it all, why do you need to have the data defined in the config file?
We don't.
Oh, you don't.
That's
No.
just a place for us to store so we could see what the output of that
Oh,
was.
okay.
So if we know we wanted American football, then we could just pull that out of this here when we called it. We don't have to pass that variable through. Yep, that one, NFL, American football odds. So notice that American football odds actually went into this key here. See that? We pulled this key that came out of here, American _ NFL. When we built our API key, that was based off this sport ID here. So you guys would either have to pass that in. In this case, we're creating a function that only looks for the NFL content, right? So this API is massive. It covers a lot of sports. All we cared about was American football in this case. So we would say get odds. Then we would pass in these same strings that we have through here, right? Only now our URL is this odds string. So we take that and pass that in there. We look at our query string, which is now replacing this empty one and going here. All right. So we have a different URL we're going to, which will get the odds. We need to pass in all these different queries. Might help to put this in a format you guys can actually read it. Something like that. All right, this API key that comes up, again, this needs to be our global. So we need to pass this back to where we had it, here to here. And this one also. And we can get rid of API. All right, so now we have two functions, get sports and get odds. All right, on our odds, that's going to return that as a JSON format, and so we could just print that out. So for now, we're going to pretty print our NFL. And if we do that, you'll see that it pretty printed out these NFL stats. We scroll back to see what one of those looks like. Remember, the easiest way when you guys are first playing with this is probably to use the interactive interpreter so that you guys could play with this data easier, right? Instead of having to go back through here. So what this does is it has a dictionary. The first one that comes in has the away team of the Detroit Lions. The bookmakers then have all the different specs and everything they would want against the different spreads of who it's going through. That includes ones like FanDuel. You may have other ones like MyBooking, Points Bet Us. These are all different bookies that go through there. So what we could say is something more like for bookie in, and then we could look at our NFL, right? NFL is this whole thing. We specifically want to look at bookmakers. And then from within bookmakers, we want to look specifically at key. Is that the name of it, key, or did they have a title? Title. Right. And then we could print. Actually, we just take this. For in bookmakers, we want to specifically print bookie title. Okay. And if all that works, list indices. what I do here. Oh, for NFL. So for each bookie inside of there, we want bookie bookmakers that. Oh, come on. All right, I need to do this in a better way. Let's look at our output again real quick. All right, so for each one of these in this list, we have the whole title, and there is a lot in there. That's the problem. Let's do this. NFL 0. Just grab the first one that's out of there. So print. Does everybody see what I'm doing there? NFL, we just want to grab the first result and print that out so that we don't have to chunk through all of them. All right, and that first result was this massive list that went all the way out, right? Let's undo that and just print the first result. There we go. All right, so now that we got our first result, we could even pretty print that so we can get an idea of what we're seeing. Okay. So in this first result that came back, the away team is the Detroit Lions. The home team is the Chiefs. Commencement time is on the 8th. We can get some information about this particular line. All right. If we go through each one of these bookmakers, then we can get a list of all the different bookmakers that are out there. Right. So let's do that. Let's just print a list of all the bookmakers. We would specifically want this first one. We're looking for the title of bookmakers. Right. And what we want to print out of that, sure I got that right, is the titles. Now notice this is a list of all these bookmakers inside of there, right? So we want to grab our bookmakers, which is a list, and we want to do a print on the inside of that. So for bookmaker, or let's just call it bookie and bookmakers for that particular result, print the bookie title. So bookie title. There you go. Those are all the different bookmakers that we can pull back from.
Just can
Yeah.
you scroll back up toward the top. A little bit?
Yeah. That makes sense.
Yeah. So like I'm a little rusty, but like with get the query string, are you using that to search what's in the JSON file?
No, the query string is looking for specifically the results we want to get back. So some of these have different query strings. Like for sports, the only thing in that query string was whether or not this all parameter was being sent. If we look at odds, in the odds, it had all these different parameters you could pass in to filter the results. So markets would be any one of these options. Date format is any one of these options. And odds format is any one of these options. And it tells you what the default option is if you don't pass it. So that's the odds. We could also get the scores. And this would be from the number of days in the past from which the return completed games. So this would just get us the scores if we wanted to get the scores, right? And that's a real simple function. We would just pull the scores, tell it the number of days we wanted to pull and go. So say you wanted to get the last scores from the last week in the game, then we could take this query. So let's copy this in. Let's get a new one here. It's a new function called def get scores. Paste that stuff in. We don't need request there. And we're going to steal this same way of getting this key. Dumping that in here. Need to get the variable name up here. Put that here. Okay. Instead of 3, we wanted to do the last week, right? 7. And then we would print out those results. And let's change that to pretty print so we can see it. And of course, we got a color function. So all right. And so what it came in here was invalid days from. Evidently, it doesn't like 7. Let's just try 3. And so from the last 3 days, we can get all the different games. All right. And this is a lot of different games that are showing up in there from the last times they came through. But we would want to format that output in a way that made sense, right?
Yeah.
So you would say something like let's do this. You call this scores equals get scores, and then you could say something like for score in scores. Right. We would want to print game actually, and let's do
This is going to work. It's going to the bottom. Okay. It
This
says
here?
that- It says all these were completed. It says false. This is for, I don't know if they have this season started yet.
it's probably for the last one that went. Commencement time. This is for all the games, period.
If they have planned that.
Yep, throughout the entire season, it looks like. So say we just wanted to particularly check to see if the Kansas City Chiefs were home games, right? So say we wanted to get all the home games. We could say something like if score, and we specifically want to look at home games, so we would put in, whoops, what is that called? Home team?
_2.
Yep. We're looking specifically for home team, and if that equals the Chiefs. Then we could just print that whole dictionary for the time being, right? So pretty print, pp print, the score. And that should give us all the home games, which we can see up here of all these games going in there. And then you would have to filter that out where, and this is like the end of time. I don't know why it's given us such a long range. So valid integers are from 1 to 3, the number of days in the past from which to return the completed games. If this field is missing, only live and upcoming games are returned. So that honestly gave us back every year. I don't,
You can't go above 3. You can only go 1 to 3.
that's
Or else
what,
it prints out everything it has.
yeah, that's what it looks like. If you actually, it's only numbers 1, 2, and 3. And even though it says days, doesn't look like exactly days kind of thing. So the idea is that you would have to sit here and play with these APIs to get all these different titles back and figure out. So if we wanted to figure out every home game, which it looks like it has, but on this commence time, we're obviously not Cincinnati with the home team of the Browns. So we didn't just pull those, right? Is that because I had a pretty print up here. That's what's going on. No, I know what's wrong. Return this. There we go. Okay. So here are all the games that are just the Chiefs, in which they are the home team, and this is all the away games. So if we wanted to grab specifically the away team, we could just do that and print out that. So print the score away team. And that would just print out a list of all the away teams in that order. Right. Now we grabbed all these, and this is all the home games and who they're against, but they're not necessarily in the right order per se, right? We would have to go to the commence time and organize by the commence time. Does anybody remember how to sort?
That was.
It's like that really tricky Ford problem from 360, right? So the idea is that you have a list of all these dictionaries come back. You would have to grab all the commence times and store that variable and then be able to go sort and pull all those out. Or you could do the 4x and x and all the other stuff that you did before.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
I think isn't there's a thing in assembly where you can just do like ASC or DESC to return your results ordered, but
Yep.
they're not equivalent to Python. is there?
So there is, it's you do a loop inside of a loop and it's like
Oh.
4x and x and that way it will sort and you can use sorted. So
Oh,
you would
okay.
use dot sorted or lambda, the lambda x, it will actually get you that in a sorted
Okay.
fashion. So even though this live sports bet only has 3 endpoints, right? You have sports, odds, and scores, but there's a whole API you could build around this, right? Because you do odds and scores to get this information, it's going to return this massive amount. You could filter that down even further if you wanted to. So like odds, we could pull everything out, the spreads, just get the American football stuff that we wanted. Now, once you get all that data, you're probably going to have 13 different functions just to organize that data in a way that you want to print out to the user. So you could write a quick program on how to do all of that. And then you could search and get all these different users. So it might be nice to get all of these different games for a particular name, but you would have to grab every team, put that in a list so they could pick from the list of teams. All right, we picked the Chiefs. All right, for the Chiefs game, here's all the home games. All right, here's all the away games. Here's the entire season if you wanted to. You could build out a lot of functions in order to pull that out. And then obviously you can get down to what this whole thing was about, which was pulling the actual the odds for each one of these.
Yeah.
So if you've got like the app for DraftKings and that, it's pulling this kind of information, right? That's just DraftKings, where this is pulling from every bookie that's out there. As you notice, there was like 12 of them for the odds making.
I have a question about something else.
Yeah.
When we were setting up the Steam one last class.
Yep.
You used a domain name that you already had, so will I have to go out and like get a domain name for like a year? And
Probably.
just use it, okay.
Yeah, for your web app. Yeah.
Okay.
And if you use this class, you should have got a discount for that. In your student development pack, I'm pretty sure you get a free or a discount one.
Okay.
All right. How are we feeling on APIs?
Pretty good. They seem to be pretty close to the same across the board.
Yep. Again, what we're dealing here was with REST APIs, right? We're pulling for information, getting it back, and away we go. All right. I will probably, let's see. Anything else you guys want to see of this little app that we built out here for football? On how we would pull data, interact with data, etc. The idea is when this program first loaded, you would probably get this information here, right? Get your odds and get your sports. First one's get your sports, present to the user what sport they want. Then based on that sport, go get all the odds or go get all the scores of what's out there. Right. So I'm going to stop this video. We'll pick up on Thursday.